So welcome everybody to Gamecity XP Boost crowdfunding for video games in 2026. If you're new to our XP Boost series, I highly recommend you checking out our YouTube channel for more videos, including talks from speakers like Chris Zukowski or Victoria Tran on topics that are on the minds of indie game developers. And the one big question above probably all others for most indie developers is, how can I finance the development of my game? And while there are many different approaches for this, crowdfunding might be one of the most interesting ones, but it of course does come with a lot of challenges as well. So it's very good to be prepared before starting your crowdfunding campaign or even before deciding to go down that road in the first place. That's why we're super happy to have a speaker tonight who dove deep into that topic, analyzed recent cases of success and also of failure, and is here today to give us a comprehensive overview of crowdfunding for video games in 2026. So many thanks and welcome, Thomas Bidaux.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, let's talk about video games and crowdfunding. I'll start with a short introduction. So my name is Thomas Bidaux. I'm French. I live in the UK. I run a company called ICO. We are a company that help people self-publish their video games. We work with publishers and studios. But the main part is we help people, studios that self-publish. And I have that weird crowdfunding expertise. I started looking at crowdfunding when it started to be a thing in video games in 2012. I started looking at the data space because I like data, I like numbers, I like to understand trends through actual numbers rather than just hype and vibes. And I did a number of blog posts about what it means to do a crowdfunding video game back then, and then as this thing happened, I got dragged into from my 10,000 feet point of view into the trenches and started to work on actual campaigns and putting in practice the trends I was seeing from data to translate that into actual ways to operate a campaign. I'm a backer. I like crowdfunding. That's how I got interested in it in the first place. I've backed over 500 projects now, most of them on Kickstarter. I'm involved into more than 100 crowdfunding projects, also across different platforms, most of them video games. And we run a crowdfunding Kickstarter newsletter for video games every week, where we do it's a programmatic newsletter. It's very simple. It takes all the games that were released the previous week on Kickstarter and tells you which one performed the best. It's a good way for us to keep track of what's going on, and we just opened it to more people as these things could be useful, not just to us. That's a very quick snapshot of some of those 100+ campaigns I've worked on, so quite a few. It's add up because I started in 2012 working on crowdfunding campaigns, so over 13 years now, close to 14 working on crowdfunding campaigns. And like I mentioned, I like data and I like looking at data for any trends that I observe. So these are numbers for Kickstarter and video games at the end of 2025. So these are the most recent numbers I have. And they give like a snapshot of the platform. And Kickstarter, as it is now, is the biggest platform for video games for crowdfunding. It's not the only platform, but it's definitely the main one where the majority of projects are launched at the moment. And it has a before and after 2012, obviously, when it went from not existing for video games to becoming a platform for video game. Even it had like highs and lows. 2013 was the best year ever with the big projects. It never also disappeared, the lowest it was 16 million a year in video games. And it's kind of like that stable amount of money. And 2024, 2025 were two good years for Kickstarter and video games post the 2015 record year, right? 2024 was slightly better than 2025. It doesn't show onto the graph because it's only millions. It's running things to the nearest million, but it's close enough for one another, and definitely the two best years since 2015. So, 2025 was close to 2024, and 2024 was the most money raised since 2015. So it's there. It's not revolutionizing the video game industry and changing the way games are funded, but it's a stable and steady platform that stayed true and working for uh, some projects who launched on there. And if you look at the number of projects, individual projects launching on Kickstarter, so these are the projects that got funded. It doesn't count the projects that were not funded. I don't have that data point in a good, reliable way, but we estimate it's probably 20-25% of the project that launch on Kickstarter get funded for video games, and that's been steady over the years. But again, 2024, very strong year. Most projects funded on Kickstarter ever, more than 2014, more than 2015, which was the most money. So not only it's not just like a couple of projects getting funded, but there's actually out in total a bigger number of projects that that are successfully funded on Kickstarter. 2025 slightly lower than 2024, but still, one of the best years there was. And this is the one that I find the most interesting is the break down all the project based on how much money they've raised. The Zeus Successus project, and they put them into tier, so less than $10,000, 10 to 50K, 50K to 100K, 100K to 500K, and 500K and more. And what was interesting in 2024, it was one of the best year in terms of number of projects that raised more than $100,000. And that's true for 2025, still a very good year for a project that raised more than $100,000. So there's probably fewer projects that do like 3, 4, 5 million than at the big peak of Kickstarter. But there's actually more of them who are in that range of $100,000 and more, which is, where it starts to make a bigger difference for the studios. So not as big in 2025 than 2024, but still a very good year. And also not very notable, 11 projects did more than $500,000, which has never been, we've never had so many projects raising more than $500,000 than like 10 years ago in 2015. So like most projects above 50K since 2025, since 2015. There's a typo in there. So I have a couple of key principles I think it's good to go over on what makes a project successful or not successful on Kickstarter. There's a few typical red flags and things like that. And I think it's good best practices to look at and concepts to absorb when you look at Kickstarter and whether or not you want to do a crowdfunding campaign for your project. So the first three things I have is my 3 red flags: free-to-play games, games for kids, and mobile games. All 3 of those categories are more difficult to successfully fund on Kickstarter for lots of different reasons. Like game for kids, you target the parents. Parents are more difficult to convince. Games for kids, because it takes time to get the reward between the moment you back it and the moment it's delivered. Kids change, grow up, move on from their different tastes. Very difficult to convince parents to support the project. Mobile games, lots of different things why it's more difficult. There's not a lot of premium game. Premium is what works on Kickstarter. It's much more difficult to distribute games on mobile when you are not native on the mobile. You need to buy the keys. There's a lot of friction for creators. The price point for a game is much lower on mobile, so it's much more difficult to raise enough money to make a difference on a project on mobile, etc. Lots of reasons for mobile not to work. Free-to-play is interesting because free-to-play in its concept is the opposite of crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is about you have not played the game, or maybe you've played a demo, but mostly you've been told the promise of the game, and you are ready to spend money before having full access to the game. And free to play is a little bit the opposite. It's like you have access to the game, you've played it, and after that you're going to spend money. And it's not the only reason that free to play games don't work on Kickstarter, but there's a bit of philosophical polar opposites in the nature of those two principles. Now, it happens that some free-to-play games actually are successful on Kickstarter. There's a game, an MMO called Epitome, that was very successful, especially in Germany. I believe Germany was the biggest country for that project. And that was like a month ago, right? But in general, as a principle, a lot of free-to-play games who try their luck on Kickstarter have struggled a lot to get the funding. It's also more difficult to understand the value proposition of a free-to-play game than of a premium game. And the value proposition is very important when you want to understand how generous a reward is for a Kickstarter backer. And then there's a number of things that work really well. Having an existing brand and an engaged fan base is a massive shortcut for crowdfunding. People already love your brand, product, or anything, and that is going to be more easier to convince. You do need an audience to do a Kickstarter campaign. It's something we can go over, but it's very difficult to start the life cycle of a project, announce a project at the same time doing a crowdfunding for it. I mean, it was something that was happening in 2012, 2013, because crowdfunding was like a new thing and got people very excited. But in 2026, it's very difficult. And the way we approach things tend to be the opposite, where we build a fan base first and then we do a crowdfunding campaign, which, considering the context of the industry, makes crowdfunding an interesting solution to complement funding of a game development, but it's very difficult to fully fund from the beginning a crowdfunding video game with a crowdfunding campaign. What we see is also like undeserved genre have a better chance of getting crowdfunding, especially if they have like active communities. So game genres or themes, topics that I usually don't see in video games. People see the opportunity for these things that they like and they don't experience enough, giving them another shot. So it could be nostalgia driven, like, oh, I haven't seen a game like this in a long time. But it could also just be like a novel concept, something that, is not common and people just go into it because they want more of that kind of game. And the last one is game concepts that are easily demonstrable, things that are a bit more sophisticated in terms of how the gameplay plays and how it is, what the game is going to be when the game is fully delivered after the Kickstarter campaign. They will struggle more because you ask people to make an investment, a promise that they will give you the money in terms of a promise of a game that they will like. But if the game is by nature complex and complicated and difficult to showcase and demonstrate, that will be more difficult to get there. So something that's very demonstrable on the other side has a better shot. So my example to that is usually Super Hot. So first-person shooter puzzle game where time moves when you move. You understand the concept of the game with a GIF, right, and a couple of sentences. And that went to Kickstarter, and that was fairly successful there, based on Game Jam demo at the time. And like I mentioned, the Kickstarter is the main platform for video games. There's a number of other crowdfunding platforms, and you can get a video game there and work well there. But this Kickstarter is the one that's going to be known. This is going to be the one that has less friction, where people are more likely to already have an account and they don't need to create a new account or need to double check if the website is real. So it tends to be the main platform for video games. Then a few other principles that I think are important. I'm going to drink some water for just a second. There's a principle that is, love matters more than likes. Games that have possibly a smaller audience than another game, but that audience care a lot more about the game and the game premise will have a better shot at Kickstarter. This is very much for the deeply engaged fan, the people who are really into the universe, the game experience, rather than people who are kind of interested in it. So not all games have the same degrees of passion behind them in terms of their audience. And definitely the more you are into that category, the better crowdfunding is going to be for you. Another thing that's very important is momentum is absolutely key. So a crowdfunding campaign will usually last about 30 days, a month is what we recommend and what is a good average length for a campaign. And that's, Kickstarter says it, other crowdfunding platform have the same numbers as a kind of like ideal length. But the amount of backers you get into a campaign is not linear. You're going to get a lot of backers at the very beginning and a lot of backers at the end. And in between the first 2 days and last 2 days is going to be a constant flow of support, hopefully, but it's not going to be, you don't have the kind of spikes you have at the very beginning. That means that if you want to be successful with your campaign, you need to have a very good beginning, because the beginning is going to define the baseline for the campaign when it's a bit slow. But also there's a lot of psychology at play in terms of when people find out a page, they discover the campaign, they was launched last week, I didn't check it immediately. And when they arrive, if they don't see that you've reached a significant percentage of the campaign, they will not even bother about, entering their details, logging in and making the promise for the pledge, even though if the campaign fails, they don't lose any money, right? It just doesn't happen. But what we see is that psychology means that you need to show success early on. And so the couple of numbers that are thrown around is that if a campaign doesn't do 20% in the first 48 hours, it has very little chance of success. In the same way, and a bit more intuitive, if it doesn't do 50% by the midway point, they are unlikely to succeed. Now, obviously, the best is to do 100% in the first day, right? But it's not always possible. It doesn't always make sense for your goal and the audience you have. But you should try to have the best first 2 days you can and ensure that you have enough of an audience and enough people in the starting blocks so that when you push the button, that first impulse of backers will pass through the 20% number of backers, that 20% of the goal that you need to reach. Very, very, very important, a very good principle to have in mind. Video games nowadays very much benefit from a demo and something that people can play. Even if they don't play it, people are going to feel more comfortable with a game that has a Kickstarter campaign where they know they can play the demo. It's just a matter of there's a lot of stories of Kickstarter campaigns that didn't necessarily deliver on the game promise, or gameplay didn't arrive very soon. So that now we see a massive difference between game with demos or without demos. Another element that's pretty important, if you have demo playable during your campaign, it unlocks content creators on YouTube and Twitch to be able to play the game while you are having the campaign and bringing in people. But both elements are important, both the proof of the ability to deliver gameplay and something playable, and the ability for people to promote it more easily. Then another key principle for me is do not announce your stretch goals. People look at past campaigns that have done super successful, hundreds of thousands or millions of in money collected on Kickstarter, and they will have, oh, my initial goal was 150, and then at 200 I had to get to stretch goal, and stretch goal until they have $2 million. And there's a bit of that counterintuitive idea that the stretch goals made them successful, and you need to have stretch goals from the very beginning. But you're looking at something that's stuck in the past. It's a snapshot of a project that has been over for a long time. And this is a trap. Stretch goals announced at the launch of your campaign. Let's say you want 100,000 and you have stretch goal until 500,000. Sabotage a lot of your communication. People will now expect the 500,000 euros version of your game rather than your 100,000 euros version of the game. So the initial goal becomes almost irrelevant. If you reach it, people will not celebrate. People will be like, great, when can we get to the 500K point, right? And it doesn't give you any flexibility, right? If for whatever reason one of your goals is boring, it's a lot more difficult to adjust to the next one because you've already announced too many things, right? You're like, oh, they don't like the new characters. Well, all our stretch goals are extra characters, and we've announced everything. Of course, you can correct the course at that point, but you've sabotaged a lot of your communication. So not announcing your stretch goal is a very important thing. It's a very common mistake I see on first-time creators on Kickstarter, where they look at these campaigns that have done it before and feel like they have to do it like them, not understanding that they didn't do it like this. They actually announce them one by one, breadcrumbs for people, keep people engaged throughout the life of the campaign. And a point is, which is not, true for everybody, but it's very, very common now, is like it cannot fund a whole game. It's often like a complement to funding a game. It also needs to happen when you have the demonstrable version of the game. So you need to have like gameplay footage, you need to have a demo ideally, you need to have a number of things. And for that, you have to have already put money towards that. And it's very rare for a campaign to be so successful that you recoup even that money. Usually what we see is that Kickstarter campaigns are more suitable to complement the end of development cycle, or extra polish that needs to be funded, or some extra marketing that people want to put into that. And it's still, very welcome, especially like crowdfunding creates an extra marketing moment for many people, and that benefits the project on top of the money that they source. But it's not the full source of funding in most cases. And so more recent things that have been added to Kickstarter, some of them recent is a big word. It's been like a year and a half, but things that I like to bring up because they are not always seen by people who've looked at Kickstarter for a while. So I think it's good to bring up. So the most important one of all of them is the addition of the coming soon page. Prior to launching your Kickstarter campaign, you can have a pre-launch campaign page that will allow you to present the project and collect followers on the page that will be notified at different moments in the life cycle of the game. The main one being when you launch the campaign, when the campaign is in the last 48 hours, and when the campaign is in the last 8 hours. As we are talking about video game here, you can see that as very much it behaves like wish lists, and it is very, very, very similar to wish list. And this is by far the most useful thing since it's been added to the platform, because it allows us to really finally understand how ready a campaign is prior to launch. I'm working on a campaign right now, and they have flexibility for when they can launch the campaign. We've set the target number of followers. We are halfway through, and they're like, well, we need to get, double that number of followers until we can push the button. And that's making it very comfortable that when they will launch the campaign, they should reach their goal very, very quickly and be able to be very comfortable with that part, and focus on incremental addition to the game with stretch goals. Here's the Kickstarter. I did the add-ons concept. You can now have your main reward, but you can also have like bespoke add-ons that can complement your pledge. It's very common for people to look at extra ways to support a project. So add-ons can be an interesting way to get the extra money from the most engaged people in the audience of the game. Let pledges is something that Kickstarter added also fairly recently, where at the end of your campaign, you can still collect funds and you can still get backers. Their offering might be different. There might be slightly different rewards. There may be slightly different pricing, but they still basically offer like an extra chance to collect extra money from the company itself. They have something called feature rewards that tell you that this is the reward that we want people to pick. Other than that, it's the rewards are listed by order from the cheapest to most expensive. This is a good way to say, hey, this is my collector's edition. This is important for you to notice, to put it on top. And secret reward is something that I've not used a lot, but is interesting if you have like a core VIP of people, or a small group of people you want to treat in a special way, where you can give them a link to a reward that only the people with that link can pick. So it's been used on like, like VIP group of people in communities, like moderators, or this sort of like community role. Or it's been like people who are in the newsletter can get the secret reward. There's a number of things there that can be done. It's a fairly interesting tool. It really varies from community to community if it makes sense to use. And they've added the pledge management tool. So Kickstarter always added a way for you to manage, like to survey your backers after you've successfully funded your campaign to say, what's your email? Which version of the game do you want between Google Games, Steam, Epic Game Store, whatever, if you have different platforms. If you do physical rewards, like what is your size of a t-shirt? It was always been a little bit simple, and the new version of the pledge management tool on Kickstarter is a lot more sophisticated, which you have other third-party tools that still exist that you can use, but they are expensive to use. Especially for video game and digital distribution, because there's not as much add value from those tools as when you have physical items. But they also do things like more sophisticated, like shipping options and things like that. But the Kickstarter adding their own pledge management tool, which have all these sort of options, is very welcome. It also makes the most boring topic in the world, which is VAT and sales tax, easier for creators on projects to manage, because Kickstarter can handle your sales tax and VAT declarations for you if you use the pledge management tool. And last but not least, you have the pledge over time, which you can activate. It's an option on a campaign where you can say, I can receive pledge over time. And that means like backers who have who pledge more than 120 euros. That's enough. 120 euros have the option to pay in 3 installments, like at the end of the campaign, and then 1 month, and then another month later. This is a very good option. It means that people can feel more secure about pledging at these amounts. On a couple of campaigns I've managed, that's been like made a significant difference for the backers. It's not like they would not have pledged, but I think it just makes it easier on their finance to be able to pay in 3 installments. So that's all recent stuff that's been added. I think one I could have added is there's a bunch of options on how you communicate with backers that's been added like in the past 2 weeks as well. That's pretty interesting. You can do surveys now. You can also make updates that target your followers rather than just the backers. And so, yeah, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the coming soon page specifically because it's a very important tool. It's very much the one that makes a campaign successful before we even push the button. So this is like screenshots from an existing campaign. They've since launched. They did 80,000 euros, I believe, something like this. But the coming soon as that like key art, description of the project, and then optionally you can add content like on the Kickstarter page. In their case, they've put like in the description, there was like a GIFs of the game and where to follow the game on Steam and different social platforms they were having. It is very much a game changer in the way you prepare for a Kickstarter campaign, because knowing that you have a number of followers will translate into a number of backers is very important. I think I have an actual formula here that should be helpful to understand how useful it is. So when you have a coming soon page, your followers to backers conversion ratio at launch is 10 to 20%. So you have 1,000 followers. You can expect to have 100 backers from those followers more or less at launch. And they will not be the only backers, right? This probably in the first, in the first day could going to be like 2 or 3 times that many people will actually back your campaign. But it gives you like a more or less guaranteed number that you can play around and say, okay, so if I have 1,000 followers, I have 100 backers, and they spend on average $50. I know I have a guaranteed of $5,000. If that's multiplied by 2 or 3, I have a guaranteed $10,000 to $15,000 at launch. And you can use that number to basically look at, does it mean I am at the 20% in 48 hours numbers that Thomas was talking about? If yes, then you're in a good shape, right? And you probably want to have even more than that, but it's at least you are in that success range. If it's less than that, then you're probably in a danger zone where you probably want to have more followers and wait to launch your campaign before that. The follows to backer conversion at the end of a campaign is about 18 to 20%. Where this number have to be understood in a certain way is this talks about followers at the end of the campaign. And you keep getting new followers throughout the life of your campaign, because when the campaign is live, people can decide to not back you immediately, but become a follower instead and wait for maybe the end to decide whether or not they want to back the campaign. So that if you say it's 10 and 20%, it's not like, oh, I have 1,000 followers at launch. That means I have 100 of them as backers in the first day, and then 200 of them at the end of the campaign. What's more likely to happen is you're going to have like 300 of them, because you will keep accumulating followers throughout the life cycle of the campaign. It's a good number to know and be aware of, because that gives you also the reserve. So let's say you launch a campaign, you have like 12% conversion. That 12% is about 200 people. You know that by the end of the campaign, you will probably have twice as many who are going to come in. And so you know that you have that amount of unrealized pledges, unrealized money waiting for you. And it's sometimes helpful when you are at the very end of a campaign and you don't know if you're going to hit the goal, but you have that reserve, right? You know that, okay, I should have like another $5,000 coming in. That should push us through the line for the goal, and understanding. This is data we didn't use to have. This is a system that we didn't use to be able to leverage the follower system. And so it's very good to be able to use that as a system to understand where you are with your campaign. Oh, this is not the right slide. What's going on? Yes, that's right. Sorry. So I have a couple of examples. This is what those slides are. Apologies for this. But I have a few like concluding words before we go into the questions. And then if we have more time after the questions, I can go into a couple of case study, a couple of projects I've worked on that I did interesting things I can illustrate, or I can explain the lessons learned from what they've done. So just understanding the opportunities. I think you should put your coming soon page up as soon as you can, because you need to accrue those followers over time, and the sooner the better. There's a bit of thing with video game where you have other things that compete in terms of call to action. Like, should I invite people to follow my Kickstarter page, or should they wishlist my game on Steam? Because you also need wishlist on Steam. My consideration for this tends to be neither. You want to maybe send them to a landing page where you take their email, and from their email, then you invite them to both your Kickstarter and your Steam page. Capturing people's email is a very useful marketing tool. When people like your game, they want to hear about the game. A surprisingly good number of them are okay to share that, and not everybody is on socials, not everybody's on Discord, not everybody follow the Steam news even. So I find that's a good system. Tailor the campaign to your audience. Like, there's a lot of little things that you can do that are unique to your game that a Kickstarter will leverage. That's a good thing to do. Don't let other campaigns dictate your own. It's a bit of the, looking at past campaigns and try to define what they do. They've done a t-shirt, we should do t-shirts. Everybody's doing like a physical collector's edition, we should do physical collector's edition. Do not do things you don't know how to do. Do things that you master and that make sense for your campaign. It's very easy to be trying to do the carbon copy of a very successful campaign, hoping that that's the recipe for success. It's not like that. Each campaign have their own systems and their own reasons to be successful. There's new features coming up on Kickstarter all the time. There's a few processing stuff that should appear. And I think the last thing is always, I always tell people, there's a team at Kickstarter dedicated to the games category. Their job is to make you successful. You should talk to them, right? There's that email, games@kickstarter.com, is definitely a catch-all email that goes to the whole games team at Kickstarter. there's 5 or 6 of them. Uh, use it, right? If you're considering doing a Kickstarter campaign or you're about to launch a Kickstarter campaign, they can give you good advice. They understand the platform better than anybody else. But also, if they like your project, they can give you project we love, which is a little badge that helps visibility. And if they really like your project, they can put you in their newsletters, and the newsletter help with visibility, attract attention to people, and is a helpful thing to have. And I have lessons from previous campaigns, but I think let's go over questions if we
Yeah.
have them.
We actually do have a first question in the chat, and to our audience in Zoom, feel free to post more questions. I already also have a couple, but the first question from the chat was, is there a way to determine underserved genres in numbers?
Some people have tried to do that. They've been using datasets from websites like Steam Spy or Game Discover Code to try to identify that. I think if there was an easy way to do it and doing it systematically, uh, we would know about it. I think it's easier to actually take something that you're interested in, see is it underserved or overserved, right? Is there too many games in that genre? In the sense that there's a lot of them who have very few traction on their platform, mostly Steam. I don't think there's a good systematic way to basically do that across all genres. But on your own, yes, you can look at, take the, Steam tags that are pertinent to you, go to Game Analytics as well, like those websites, and see like, do you have like big success in the past? So that's a genre that has a big audience. And is there any recent big success or not? And how many games in that genre are released every month or year to see how underserved or overserved it is.
You mentioned the power of the new coming soon pages. Would it be a good approach to put a coming soon page out there just to test if there's any interest in your game? And if you see there's not enough interest, you don't just postpone your campaign, but you don't do it at all?
Yes, absolutely. This is a totally fine approach to it. It's something we've done a few times where I think there's potential on Kickstarter. The game studio think there's a potential on Kickstarter, but we don't know there's a potential on Kickstarter. You probably want to manage expectation. You probably want to tell people the coming soon is not a promise we'll go to Kickstarter. The coming soon is we want to do it. We're interested in doing it. But also we won't do it unless we see traction, kind of like the way you message that to your community. And then absolutely you might end up with like, well, we have no traction. We should not do the Kickstarter campaign. That's happened a couple of times when we run these experiments. On the Kickstarter side of things, coming soon page is not committing you to anything. You can take it down whenever you want. You can remove it whenever you want. The coming soon is also a colloquial term we use for those pages, but there's no definition on soon. I ran a campaign where the coming soon page was live for 18 months because we wanted to reach a certain critical point, a critical mass on the number of people who were following it. And that took a year and a half. The game in question was not dependent on the Kickstarter. The team could, work on other projects in the meantime, and it was better to have the Kickstarter be the right amount of success rather than fail. So this is also something to keep into mind. There is no maximum length of time for a Kickstarter campaign. I've seen probably some campaigns like launch after 2 or 3 years on the coming soon state now. And there's probably one there's a campaign that has like 50,000 followers, still not launched, and I think they will never launch at that stage. I think they move on. But yeah, you can do that over a period of time. One thing I would say is my advice, and it varies from project to project, but my advice is usually do not plan to have like at least 3 months between the launch of your coming soon and the launch of your campaign to give time for the community to hear about it, people to follow it, and people get engaged with it. It's good uh, a period of time. More can be better, but I'd say at least 3 months. That's my point of view. I've been in meetings with the games team at Kickstarter. They tell people 6 months is better. Um, I think it depends on a lot of parameters, but in general, you need to give a bit of a good chunk of time for people to get used to the idea of the Kickstarter and the recruiting to be in full motion before you actually launch your campaign.
One more question that's very close to what you just talked about. When do you start the coming soon page in terms of in the development process? Already at ideation, or when something prototypish can be shown beyond sketches and mockups?
It's a good question. I think it depends on do you have an audience or not? So some studios have an existing fan base, and I think they could start probably relatively early. They're coming soon. I think if you don't have an audience, you probably want to have something you can demonstrate uh, for the coming soon page. Just so usually we approach the coming soon page as part of the overall marketing of the game, and the game needs to be announced. And to announce a game, usually we want to have like a trailer that shows a little bit of gameplay. So that's kind of like what defines a lot of the discussion we have on when the product is ready in terms of a coming soon page is the product is ready to be announced, means it's ready to go on coming soon. And for that to be announced, you need to have assets that are exciting and good eye candy. Now, I think if you have existing audience, you can start very early and don't tell people except your core audience base and get them to grow organically. That'd be fine. And you can make it, then you can do it like before any of that. I've done coming soon pages where we only add concept arts and some animatics. But then the time between the start of the coming soon and the start of the campaign was definitely longer as well. Because you need a demonstrable game by the time you launch the campaign.
We also have a question in the chat regarding rewards. I will get to that in a second. Just one more question about games that make sense on Kickstarter. You mentioned in the beginning that games for kids don't make sense, and you explained it very well. Why not? Would you even say that it makes sense for certain genres or for certain audiences in particular? I would think that people like above 35 are maybe more drawn to Kickstarter games in general, so they do play certain genres. Do you see anything in your data that supports that?
Yes. So uh, I think I'll start with an example of games we don't see on Kickstarter. We don't see a lot of military first-person shooter. And we don't see, sports game. And I think because those genre are very well served, right? If you want to do a military realistic shooter, you play, Call of Duty, Battlefield, or anything like that. And if you want a sci-fi one, you play, one of the mini sci-fi shooters. Anything that's very big production value and part of that cycle of game that release every year, we don't see much of. What we see a lot of at the moment is also coming from the options you have as a game studio in terms of getting funding through your life cycle and the life cycle of the game. So for instance, we see narrative games on Kickstarter. And one of the reason, not the only one of the reasons we see narrative games on Kickstarter is because it's much more difficult for a narrative game to launch in early access. And so we see Kickstarter as a alternative to early access as a way to fund a game in development. And so if you have a game that's very systemic, you can say, hey, there's not a lot of content, but here's, the core system. There's no campaign. There's missing like, a number of things in there. You can go like early access, try it, Whereas my narrative game, well, here's the story. The story is not going to change, you just see the first third. It's a bit more difficult to get them to follow through early access. So we see a lot of those narrative games go to Kickstarter, and that works pretty well for them because they tend to have also that like strong identity. There's a twist in the protagonist, the setting, or other things like that. It's also a genre that's not super well served sometimes. Like we've seen, the very first big successful Kickstarter campaign was for a point and click adventure game. which very much is, narrative and the subgenre, especially at the time. So that's one component. Another trend we see is a lot of kind of like cozy, wholesome game go to Kickstarter. I think it's a mix of very, very engaged audience. When you're cozy, asking for help feels right. And another component is we see a lot of those cozy game help each other. There's a lot of cross promotion that happens in between games on Kickstarter, whatever the genre. But I think people who have cozy games tend to be more open to the idea of like, oh yes, I'm going to help you because your game is cute and all. They don't feel like as competitive between each other than developers of other genres, potentially. So that's definitely a trend at the moment. As some things that we see maybe more often. There's another kind of like very weird, unique thing in games that do very well on Kickstarter, which is MMORPGs. They're very expensive to make. They are not necessarily something I would recommend for people to develop, considering how much work and energy they require. But when you go to Kickstarter, people who want to get involved into an MMO project themselves playing that MMO for years and tend to spend more into that space. The MMO genre has the highest average pledge per backer of any other category on Kickstarter when it comes to video games. And so this is kind of like a weird, and it's not a huge trend, right? There's been probably 3 MMOs on Kickstarter in the past 12 months, which is, probably more than the previous 2 or 3 years before that. But still something that's interesting in the a pattern that exists there. Don't do MMOs. So don't do MMOs. It's very expensive and very, very complicated.
Yeah, let's dive into that super central and important topic of rewards. Are there any particular rewards that you should or should not offer?
So my rule of thumb for any video game is as much as you can, I would recommend to avoid physical rewards. Not because they're bad, but because video game studios it's not their job to do physical rewards. It's not their job to make collector's edition, print t-shirts, anything like that. And you can raise a good amount of money with purely digital stuff that you know how to make. One of my, lessons from previous campaigns we saw here is one is Starfinder Afterlight, right? One of the things they did was only digital rewards. They did close to $1 million. They did like 800,000 euros, and they have zero physical rewards. They add a number of things that work really well for them. They add cats. You could have add your own cat to the menagerie of cat you can get into the game. And that was very, very popular. But that's number one is like try to avoid as much as you can physical rewards. Try to be creative with digital rewards. There's lots of room for creative people to find like quirky things and try to stick to things that are not game changing, like like a unique DLC creature or character. That tends to be expensive to do and might upset people who missed the Kickstarter campaign if that's exclusive to the Kickstarter. Whereas like a hat, a different animation for your character, a little badge. In Starfinder, it's a CRPG game based on a TTRPG system called Starfinder, where you roll a d20. When you play, you roll the d20. It appears in 3D into the screen. They have a number of like unique 3D d20 that appear on the screen that are unique to the Kickstarter backers, and that's fine, and people like that, and you could do that. Then after that, it really depends from game to game. Things I like to do is I like to do something where your base reward, when you compare it to buy a game on Steam, is incomparably superior. And when I say incomparably superior, it means that there's things in that reward that you can't get on Steam. And something as simple as you have a special role on Discord and I have your name on your credit. That's kind of like the two starting points, like buy the game. If my game is $20 on Steam, it's $20 on Kickstarter. But on Kickstarter, my name is in the credits. I get a role on Discord. That's kind of like a good baseline. Then things that are pretty common is like digital soundtrack and digital art book are very common. Access to playtest, access to the alpha or the beta, pretty easy. extra content that is purely cosmetic just for you is very nice. And then usually we see like things like, hey, I would like to have my cat into the game, or I like to have my portrait into the game. I have my own face in the number of games I've backed over the years. Is easy to do. Always make sure that you project yourself in terms of how much work goes into something. Like doing my face in a pixel art is probably not a lot of work, but putting my whole body as like a 3D model statue into the game, which is something that we did for like the Good Life. You probably want to price that right. Makes it like expensive at the point where if people pick it, you don't feel like, oh shit, we need to do it now. And more like, okay, they've paid a good amount of money. We'll do it because that's worth it in terms of how much they gave us, right? These are kind of like the general principles I looked like for the rewards.
And regarding handing out the Steam keys to the backers, in the end, those sales won't be reflected in this official Steam review count.
Yeah.
About that.
So that's been for the past. So yes, so the Steam keys you get from Steam are going to be retail keys, and that means they don't count on your Steam review score. That means that some of your most hardcore fans, their review will not count for your game. It used to be something that was a consideration on the product I was working on. I've since changed my view on that. When you do a Kickstarter campaign, because we looked at the wish list difference between the before and after a campaign, you gain so many wish lists, you get so many eyeballs, so many more people interested in your game, and lots of them are not interested in Kickstarter. Just they don't like Kickstarter, they don't have money that month, they don't know what it is, they don't care, they just think they found a new cool game and they'll play when it's out. That the number of people you've lost in terms of reviews by doing a Kickstarter campaign, I think is made up by the extra visibility a Kickstarter campaign is bringing. That's what I'm thinking. I've not have like good hard data on that, but we've looked at that a little bit more closely in the past 12 months, and it seems to hold up. Like there's a pure net positive on doing a Kickstarter campaign from a marketing point of view that offset the loss of reviews when you launch.
Yeah, thank you. A little bit relating to that, another question. Since you talked about conversion rates from Kickstarter followers to backers, do you have an estimate for a critical mass of social media followage for a Kickstarter to become profitable, for example, by a number of Twitter followers?
A great question, because that's how we used to do it before we had the coming soon page. We used to look at how many people you have on your different social media platform, all sorts of things like that. And the short answer is it's always been really bad. It's always been a guess compared to the numbers we have for the coming soon page that holds true across a lot of projects. I had a project that had 100,000 followers on their Facebook page early on, 2012, on Kickstarter, and they absolutely flopped. They fell flat, didn't work at all. And it ended up that a lot of people on the Facebook page had been our low quality followers on Facebook. They had been very aggressive, very efficient in their recruitment of people. And a lot of people thought the game was cool, but not, they were more into the like than the love. In terms of the spectrum of how they feel about the game, and that really kind of like tricked them into thinking they would have an easy Kickstarter campaign in that sense. So I've been burned on that. I also worked on a couple of projects where we had huge social media reach, like massive, like we had a sci-fi writer tweet about the project, and they had like millions of followers on Twitter. And that translates into maybe 3 or 4 backers because we were able to track that. Because the overlap between that specific sci-fi writer and that specific game genre were very far from one another. There were very different themes, different in the world. And also, people who follow the writer are people who like to read books, not necessarily play games. And you would think like, oh, millions of people, probably a good chunk of them play games. Actually, it happens it was not true. So It's not easy to do that. I think it's good. It's a good first time. When I first work on a project, the first thing we ask is how big is your audience, how many followers you have, just to get a sense of how much work has been done to grow the audience. But it's very difficult to translate that into how successful your campaign is going to be. There's also like what is the nature of the project and how close it is to what we usually see on Kickstarter. There's a couple of projects we worked on recently where they had good followers, but they on socials, I mean, but they didn't translate into Kickstarter followers or Kickstarter backers because they are of a demographic that's not really on Kickstarter. They're not really used to it. So we had to do a lot more education about what it is and how it works and why they should care about. So there's a lot of factors. I would say when I look at any socials numbers for like a project pre-coming soon, what we look more at is, and so we look at the raw number. You know, if like you have 50 followers on the social media, it's not going to be you are the beginning of building out your audience. So there's lots of work to do. So we look at the raw size, but we also look at the engagement. If you have a huge number but low engagement, it's not good. If you have a smallish audience but good engagement, we're like, okay, you have people who love you. It's a better sense. And the last thing I want to say is emails tend to index better than any other social. Like if you have a newsletter, this is probably the best indicator because we can look at the open rate and the raw number of people on an email list will tell us more about the quality of your audience than socials. Some people are not on Twitter. I'm not anymore. Some people are not on Instagram. Some people are not on Facebook. It's difficult to have a good picture. Um, Everybody has an email. Not everybody likes newsletters, but everybody has an email. So I find it as a bit more um, neutral metric to gauge an audience, I would say.
That's probably very hard to answer, but do you have any kind of an estimate on how many hours a small studio or maybe even a solo dev should calculate for preparing and running a Kickstarter campaign and also for, of course, maintaining the community afterwards? Because I think for many, the question is, should I really put the effort in because I'm just one person, or maybe I'm two persons, and we have to balance our time between making a campaign and actually developing the game?
Yeah. Um, I don't have a good number of hours or anything like this. What I can say is that a lot of the things you need to do for a Kickstarter campaign is not going to be only for the Kickstarter campaign. So everything you do to grow your audience, it's good for the whole game, right? You know, building your followers on Kickstarter is also building followers for your game. Some assets you build on your game, like having good gifts, having good, demonstration of your core gameplay loop, how you present the game, all the messaging you use to describe your game, your USPs, all of that is going to be useful somewhere else, whether it's the store page or a marketing pitch with people or anything like that. So I would say 70, 80% of the work you do for a Kickstarter campaign is reusable somewhere else. Now, it's a very specific effort. It's a very unique exercise, and it is it can be a distraction. Um, I think very often when there's small indie studios who struggle to do a Kickstarter campaign, they also struggle to do marketing, period, you know. Um, And the game studios who are comfortable with Kickstarter, they're the one who already doing like marketing as something as part of their day job. You know, maybe they dedicate like half a day a week. Maybe they have someone who like part-time only does that, but there's already kind of like something in place to self-promote marketing, build the audience. And then Kickstarter added on this is extra work, but it's something that goes in line with that, right? So I also think that a good Kickstarter page is nice, but I've seen campaigns that were well done, but not huge in terms of like there's lots of content, lots of rewards, lots of deep explanation about the gameplay. Sometimes it's just very straight to the point. This is who I am, this is what I'm making, these are the rewards. Please support me. There's a campaign called Spilled. It's a game, the game is out now, Spilled. Spilled.
With the picking up the oil,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. The
that's all.
Kickstarter campaign is not it's very balanced. It's not the page is not huge. It goes to the point. It's a good story in terms of like that developer and what she wanted to achieve and what she wants to do with the game. I don't think building that page was a huge task. It is when you are like part-time, like she was, but it's not do anything for like 3 months kind of task. And it worked pretty well. And I think, if you do a big campaign like a big MMO, it's a lot more work than if you do something that's more self-contained, like a story-driven game, like a narrative game. It's like, here's the story concept, here's the gameplay loop, here's the main characters, here's the rewards. Thank you for supporting me. And maybe something about who you are, that giving that human touch is always paying dividends. So yeah, I don't have a good answer to that, but it's I tend to tell people like uh, if you are into going into a crowdfunding campaign and you put energy into it and you fail, you still get out uh, you get something out of it. Like sometimes failing is interesting because you say like, why did we fail? Maybe we are not good at marketing, or maybe we didn't put enough time into marketing, or maybe the game is difficult to explain, or maybe the way the game is, the state it is not advanced enough at the moment. But it's a useful reason. It's a useful reason. It's a useful lesson to get out of that, which is much better than launching your game and finding out when you launch the game. In many ways, Kickstarter is a kind of like a dress rehearsal for launching your game. And if your dress rehearsal is bad, well, at least like, okay, thank God we didn't do that live. We still have time to adjust a few things and manage expectations to make it better, right? So and I've said that, I love crowdfunding. It's my niche expertise, and I like that. I don't want to tell people that it's good whatever happens. There's definitely some companies that are more suitable than others. Like some games have more an affinity with it. But um I think it's worth exploring more often than not for a lot of like indie studios specifically. I think a lot of indie studios also sometimes have plan A's to work with a publisher, and there's not many publishers selling games at the moment. And maybe going through the exercise of a Kickstarter is a good way to say, like, what if we don't have a publisher? What if we need to do it by ourselves? What does it mean? And sometimes it's a good surprise, like, actually, we can do it. And sometimes, well, we do need a publisher. It's difficult, but, at least you've tried it, right? You get something out of that.
All right, I think that actually was a very helpful answer. We're approaching the end of our time, but we do have one more very interesting question on the chat. Does social media ads bring some backers to the Kickstarter? Do you have experience in there? As I see often ads of Kickstarter on Instagram.
Yeah. So I've put an emoji on that question, and the emoji is like 100%. I I don't think there's a campaign I've worked on in the past 5 years where we didn't do ads, at least at a small scale. The thing is, like Kickstarter allows you to measure very efficiently if your ad is bringing people, and you have a very precise way to say, I spend $100 and they transform into $300 of pledges. And that's such a really good way to do it. And so some campaigns spend a lot of money, and you can have up to maybe 20-30% of the amount of you raised coming through ads. But even on a smaller campaign, even like €500 to find out if Reddit or Facebook are working well for your audience is a good investment, because you will know if it works or not. And if it works, then you can keep spending and then keep an eye on it until return on ad spend, as we call it, goes under the point where it doesn't make sense. I really, really, really like spending money on ads on crowdfunding campaigns because it's money well spent. It's not like on Steam where it's a little bit like of a black box. On Kickstarter, very precisely if it works. And more often than not, it does work.
Okay, I think that's all of our questions for now. I think what I'm taking away is that Kickstarters or making a campaign is also an opportunity to learn a lot about probably your game, but definitely about your audience and what you're doing right and maybe what you're doing not so right. Thank you very much for that overview. And yeah, I think I'm heading to Kickstarter. See what interesting projects are out there. Thank you very much, Thomas.
My pleasure.